We have to make a slight adjustment. I can't talk to people unless I can really see them. So I need to be able to see Delray. So we got to get a little angle going here. But welcome everybody. We got a little walk-up music. I didn't play baseball or softball, so that's about all I got right there. So that was fun. And Delray said it would make me walk faster. But anyway, welcome. As it said, the power. And when you think about, we talk about aircraft maintenance, we're specifically talking about pre-purchase inspections. But we're also talking about a pre-purchase inspection, in my mind, it's a major maintenance event. So a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing here, yes, we're going to be focusing on PPIs, but it kind of goes across the board on how you're dealing with your OEMs or your third-party MROs. And looking at the title, we were talking about power. It's a very, it's a visceral word when you think about it. Power is power. What does that mean? It can have a positive connotation, a negative connotation. What is it? And the person who has the power in aircraft maintenance is the person who writes the checks. It's our clients. It's our operators. It's our owners. That's who has the power. So when you're looking at this power, what does that mean? And what is our responsibility to the person who has the power? And as we were talking, and by the way, oh yeah, I'm Lee, if you didn't guess, I think my picture's up there. And we're gonna do a quick introduction here in just a minute, but I just wanted to kind of set the tone because they're gonna tell you a little bit about themselves and kind of their perspective on what this means. It is our job to educate, to communicate, and then to essentially really help our clients preserve the value of their asset as well as ensure the safety of the aircraft that's going in. If it's my seller, I want to make sure that I'm presenting it in the best way possible, that I have everything in line, because as we know, time kills all deals. If I don't go in prepared, then what am I doing? But I need to know the maintenance and everything along those lines. But it's my job to do that. And so when you talk about the power, it's our power to work together, to educate our owners, to be good stewards of their aircraft, their time, and their resources, as well as working together with our service providers to make sure we're good stewards of those. So as we talk about our service providers, our first panelist right here, Aaron.
Good morning. So Aaron Chrysler, I'm with Bombardier. I've been with Bombardier now for 7 years, but before that, I was with an independent in the middle of the coast, without saying the name.
In the middle of the coast.
for about 30 years. So I've kind of seen it from both sides, as an independent and as an OEM. There's definitely benefits to both sides when you're doing a pre-buy. We do love doing pre-buys. Sometimes people think you don't want to do the pre-buy, but we really like getting them. It's your first chance to see a customer. You can explain to them, the company, how things work in the company. And then there's also usually a lot of follow-on work that goes on after it. So for brokers that think we don't want to do pre-buys, we really, really want pre-buys. So sometimes it's hard to fit them in with where you can put them in the schedule, and we might talk about that a little bit later. But it's definitely a business that we want. So,
hello, everyone. Andrew McElhenney with AE Industrial Partners. We are a private equity firm focused on aerospace and defense. We have investments across commercial, biz-av, and defense, really from front-end production all the way through aftermarket and operations. So a pretty broad perspective on the overall supply chain. Relevant to this discussion, we are the control investor in Yingling Aviation, which is a full-service MRO provider in Wichita, Kansas.
Hey guys, my name is Vinny Morelli. I am with Caliber Aircraft, and we are a brokerage firm. We've been here for about 6 years now, but prior to that, I was with Dassault in the maintenance world. So I like to think I have a pretty unique perspective from the brokerage view when it comes to aircraft transactions and PPIs and those sort of maintenance events.
Hi, everybody. Delray Dobbins with Engine Assurance Program. I spent 30 years in the OEM space working for Rolls-Royce Pratt & Whitney with a brief intermission trying my hand at brokering aircraft, and because I thought that would be fun. There was a lot of things. It was educational, but Lately, about the last 4 weeks ago, I joined the engine assurance program where our engine model is solely focused on providing engine programs for out-of-production aircraft.
So as you can see, quite a bit of different experience and perspectives. And so let's just let's touch on that first. Let's talk about what the differences are. So Aaron, when you're talking about bringing somebody in for your pre-purchase inspection, what is the value add of coming to the OEM?
Okay. Backing up a second though, Delray is also a DJ. So.
Which is why we got walk-up music.
The benefits of doing the pre-buy at the OEM, you know, it's the only airframe we touch. There won't be anybody from brand G, brand F, brand E working your airplane. 100% of our tooling, 100% of our parts, 100% of our training goes towards, you know, that model airframe. There's also some engineering data issues that are starting to crop up. You know, more and more we're seeing things where you have to generate an SRPSA or get engineering to do a fix. It kind of works a little bit better when you're at the OEM. There are also benefits, you know, to being to third parties. We work with third parties a lot. You know, if we can't do all the work in-house, we'll sub a lot of stuff out to third parties. They really help us. So it's a good relationship we have with third parties. We'd like to keep it going. It's been really strong. But those are kind of the benefits, I guess, would be the engineering. There is one thing coming up, too, that we haven't really talked about a whole lot at anything else, you know, outside of, you know, internally. More and more of these airplanes have the health monitoring boxes on them. The different manufacturers have them. We've got about 400 airplanes now flying with them. Eventually, we need to start thinking about how do we fold that into the pre-buy? Is it something we can do ahead of time? Is it a report we can generate? Because right now we've got it down where we can start generating reports based on error messages you get by ATA codes, so you know what to look at on the airplane. So those are a couple things going forward.
Just a real quick, Al, please keep notes because as we've been developing our session here, we have about 6 other session ideas. That's one of them. But so Andrew, and just kind of follow up a little bit on what he was like the third party. So how does the third party view the opportunities and what's going on with to be able to do the PPIs?
Yeah, I mean, as Aaron said, it's very interconnected. It's not one size fits all of, you know, OEM versus third party. And, you know, the good news is there's a lot more demand than supply in the market today. So there's enough to go around for everyone. Some people will naturally gravitate towards the OEM solution, some of the third party and everything in between. You know, we view it as a good opportunity to, you know, continue to build our business, get aircraft in the door, new relationships, and ultimately, you know, it's all about performance and quality and, you know, satisfying the end customer, which if they're happy, you know, they'll come back and we can figure out the competitive dynamics, you know, at a later date, but performance speaks, you know, is how we view it.
So Vinny, you know, there are the differences and we look at that and, you know, value is one of I don't really like to always use the word cost because you are looking at the value of the service and the product that you're getting. And so, Vinny, when you're talking to your clients, you know, whether you're buying or selling, whatever it is, and you're evaluating a third-party MRO versus the OEM, how do you kind of explain that different value proposition?
So that's a really good question. So I think there is a perceived value when it comes to the OEMs, just straight off the bat, when you have someone going after an aircraft, let's say you have, you're representing a buyer, and they perceive that going to, you know, a Gulfstream facility when you're purchasing a Gulfstream is the best solution. But in all reality, you're going to have the same skill set at all facilities generally. A lot of the third-party facilities have individuals that have worked at OEM facilities for, you know, 10, 20, 30 years. So the skill sets are going to be the same regardless. There definitely are some advantages specifically to whether you're representing a buyer or a seller. When you're on the seller side, you don't generally want to go to an OEM. You'd rather go to a third party for various reasons. And then when you have a buyer, you'd rather go to the OEM because there are some upsides. You have an engineering department. I think that was already touched upon, but having engineering on site, you don't have to, you know, play the telephone game. You have engineers that can come straight down to your aircraft, look at the mapping, go right up, draw an or get an engineering drawing written up, and you're moving along. And again, Lee stated that time kills deals, and it does. So at an OEM, when it comes to parts and engineering and things like that, you can definitely get through a pre-purchase evaluation with a little more ease. But at the same time, you're paying for that. You're paying a premium. You're paying more labor. Your labor costs, flat rate, are going to be a lot higher. And generally, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait to get in. Right now, it's probably between 30 and 60 days to get into to get a slot for a third party, and double that at the minimum to get into an OEM facility to get into a slot, unless you know somebody.
I'll just add to that I think it's a little bit of, there's a natural migration of aircraft. And the answer to the question, OEM versus third party, there's no one answer here. You just alluded, as aircraft migrate from 3 years old, they want to go to the OEM under warranty, and now it's 18 years old, and they want a value they can get in and faster out of a third party. The aircraft, I think, naturally migrate to independence at year 15, year 20, year 25, but there's also a migration of talent. Most of the people, those third parties, spent the first half of their career trained by the OEMs. The skill set is largely the same.
So Delray, the next question was kind of for you, though, is as like a program provider. So, I mean, when you're talking about bringing something in, it's not just dropping off the airplane and leaving. There's different, as you're going through your inspections, as you're going through there, as a program provider, what have you seen about maybe possibly the differences between working with the two?
So the program's effect on the pre-buys, I think, has changed dramatically in probably the last 36 months. We all talk about supply chain. And what I'm afraid of, when everybody hears the dreaded S word, everybody thinks of parts, engines, fuel controls, hardware. I think half of the supply chain component is now labor. There's not enough labor. I've heard multiple customers say in the last 18 months, if I could find 50 technicians, I'd hire them tomorrow. Ben from Sky Service said it yesterday. I've heard Fractional say it. I've had MRNO supply it. Fixing the supply chain, the hardware aspect, is probably going to be, we'll come out of that in the next probably 1 to 2 years. The labor component, I think that's a 5 to 10 year solution.
Well, and the labor component is not just the technicians on the floor. We're talking about the entire manufacturing process end to end.
The vendors, the second tier, the
from
third
mining
tier,
to
the
installation.
OEM, the MRNO, the entire landscape.
So I think one of the things that this really brings up is when you're taking an aircraft in for a PPI as well as a major maintenance event, it's the importance of setting expectations. And one of the things that my brokerage feels very strongly about, as well as Vinny's, is a lot about the importance of your input meeting. What does that first contact, what does that input meeting look like, as well as any communications prior? And we're going back to who has the power. It's the owner, it's the operator, the person who's writing the check, and we are acting on their behalf. And so we not only have to set expectations with them, I think we have maybe approximately 28 business days left in this year. And we need to set timing expectations with them. We need to be very clear and understand what their expectations are, because now we need to articulate that to our provider. And that input meeting, so this sounds simple, but as our role is understanding the agreement. Where does that stand? How does that impact that input meeting, and how are we defining it? Vinny, think about one of the things you brought up, one of the most common, what is the definition of what we're looking for in airworthiness? So, look at that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. A PPE is not a scheduled maintenance event. So there is no, necessarily besides the work scope, there's no script for it. So when it comes to when we go into a PPE with a client, it is extremely important to have an input meeting. I don't see many brokers at input meetings, unfortunately, and I think it's very important because we're the ones that are going to be overseeing this entire transaction, including the PPE. And then obviously we're going to be going back and forth on any discrepancies and findings, so we're really the ones. So it's important for me to specifically go on site, make sure that the heads of every single back shop is there, the crew chief is there, project manager is there, sit down, define with the other side of the table, whoever we're working with to get this transaction done, that we want to have a transparent transaction. As discrepancies arise, hey, let's go ahead and take care of these discrepancies, start approving them, and that way we're obviously making this input more efficient and getting to closing quicker. But at the same time, you have so many other variables, including obviously the definition of what a unairworthy discrepancy is. And that is going to be defined in your APA. So it is extremely important, more than anything else, is to make sure that everybody in that input meeting understands, per the APA, what unairworthy means. Because that is going to be what we're going on. It's not going to be exactly what the definition is for, let's say, that OEM or in the maintenance manual. It could be different, and that's very important to make sure that that's known by everybody. So input meetings are extremely important to define expectations and make sure everybody understands what needs to be done.
Yeah, I'll second that, because probably half the pre-buy meetings we have, or the pre-induction meetings we have, neither broker shows up. Or sometimes you'll get one broker to show up, so it's really kind of skewed his direction. We're not a party to the purchase agreement, so we don't know what's in there. So we really need the brokers to show up and kind of explain, okay, here's what needs to be done, and then we get agreement on communication. Like, who does the communication go to? When does it go to them? Those kind of things. And that's whether you're at Bombardier or Yuengling. It's the same either place. We all need that information. There's nothing worse than, you get a full list of discrepancies and then dump it on the guy at the end. That just doesn't work. We have to kind of work our way through it every time we get something. We do know the hot spots to look at. We know where to start looking first. We know, take the inventory, the logbooks if something's missing. But once we find that stuff, we really need to know, how do we communicate it and who do we communicate it to? So.
Well, and like say, like for progressive, I'm sorry, Andrew, did I?
Or no, I was just going to say, from the independent perspective, I think it's important to stay focused. You could try and, service every aircraft, every type, but if you got experience in one particular airframe, you know what the hotspots are, you can anticipate what's going to come up, and you've got expertise there, that's important. You can get very broad, and ultimately that's where quality can suffer, and it's one bad experience can be detrimental to a long-term customer relationship. So I think having a reputation in particular airframes and being the go-to player for that respective airframe, and sticking to that, and you can naturally grow as you add talent and expertise. But you can't do it overnight. It takes time, and you got to build that reputation.
So kind of what you had just said right there. So like when we use a third party, we want to be able to, especially if we chose the third party, we want to be able to validate that they have the expertise, that they have the tooling, that they have the equipment, because at the end of the day, when it goes into the logbook and they see a name that they don't recognize, it's not the Bombardier Service Center, it's not one of the OEMs. They're like, why did you choose this person? What did they do? And so once again, not only on the input meeting is it the expectations, but a lot of it also is, what does the final report look like? I want my logbooks to look like this. This is what I want. This is how I want it defined, because it's almost like a new birth certificate for the airplane. It's like, this is our new record of truth for this new iteration, for this new owner. And so I want to make sure that it's very, very clear on what's happening. And so if I'm able to understand that and then articulate it, because now I've defined, Yuengling is where I want to go. Okay, so now I'm working with them, and this is what I'm doing, and this is what my expectation is. It just remove artificial hurdles with pre-planning and communication.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to something Vinny said, because you said something really important, and I want to take it a step further. Airworthy. Mm-hmm. There's a couple things that have happened this year in the engine space that 2 of the 4 engine manufacturers have now published formal guidance on pre-buys. So if the engine flew in and the engine is current on inspections, and everything in the cockpit is within limits, by definition, that's an airworthy engine. And so when you start putting borescopes through the entire engine, or a seller gives a buyer unrestricted access, that is starting to lead to issues, which is exacerbated by the rental pull factor. But we need to be, I'd like to see us as an industry be better about articulating the difference between airworthy and within limits. Because as soon as you grab the borescope, that is often the slippery slope to unintended consequences. And if the sellers realized, one, the latest guidance from Honeywell and Pratt that came out earlier this year, they might draft their APA a little differently. So I think the risk mitigation is very important at the NDOC, but it's equally important before the APA gets signed.
And yeah, just to piggyback on that, yeah, right now, Honeywell, Pratt, if you're on programs, they're only allowing for, first stage borescopes, basically just looking for FOD damage, and that's it. And it's going to definitely shy away even further from that. So we have to get to a point where everyone wants to borescope. That's just, we could probably talk about that for hours, but.
That's another session.
Exactly. But at the same time, I think we do need to start moving away from that because, like you said, if the parameters in the cockpit show that the engine is operating as designed, everything's, all the temperatures are within limitations, it's airworthy. And you're opening yourself up to a can of worms when you start looking at an engine, especially with, not many engines available. Rental pool's dried up. It's going to be a very slippery slope, especially if you're at the end of the year and you want to go ahead and get your bonus depreciation, get your flight in, and get closed. That very well might not happen if you start looking at engines. So.
Yeah. We did have to go back and revise our verbiage in our pre-buys. The level 1, 2, and 3, whatever's in there. It used to just say engine borescope. Now we have to be very clear about what's done because it'll bite the broker if we don't fix it on our end. So.
Well, and I think that's like when you talk about one of the benefits of going to an OEM versus maybe a third party is exactly what you just said, level 1, 2, 3. I mean, if you've done enough events with Bombardier, enough PPIs, you know what a level 1, 2, 3 is. The expectations are already kind of set there. Now, then I can then take that same kind of mentality to my third party and this is what I expect. And this is what I'm paying for. Real quick, somebody asked about how many business days. I'm talking about bank days. It varies. We know Aaron and his team are working probably 24/7, depending on what's going on and what shift they're on. So, yeah. But I think you brought up a very good point, both Vinny and Delray, is this all starts from the very beginning, understanding the aircraft, understanding where it goes in the agreement and being very clear. And then staying within the parameters of the agreement unless you have an amendment or something else happens. So one of the things that we were talking about scheduling slots and things like that, and we're talking about that communication and expectations. Well, my buyer expects it to go through the pre-buy, but he'd also like his interior kind of, maybe just a little touch up, or maybe a whole new interior and a paint. And, that needs to be brought to them from the very beginning so that way you can plan for that accordingly.
Yeah, we can slide pre-buys in every so often, but trying to slide a full paint and interior in, it kills us. We're booked up so far in advance on those, but that is one of the things where we work with third-party providers. We'll send Yuengling seats or something like that if we need to try to keep the whole package going, but we definitely most of your buyers know when they've looked at the airplane what it needs on the backside if they buy it. Just giving us a heads up as early as possible so that we know what to kind of plan for on the backside, or we can help set your expectations early to say, you know what, you really just structure this deal so that they go away and fly for 6 months and then come back.
And Aaron, you said something earlier that I wanted to just go back and highlight. You're talking about the data that, as an industry, we are on the verge that pre-buys will be done in the next 5 years. The buyer will get confidence from the report card. You won't even hardly ever touch the borescope unless you're troubleshooting. The report card of the data is what's going to give the buyer confidence that he's getting an airworthy engine.
Yeah.
There's actually a really good question here. Let's see. Where did it go?
What, did it disappear?
Yeah, disappeared. So basically it touched on, what do you do when some third party some third-party maintenance facilities don't give you airworthiness versus non-airworthiness distinctions because they're sick of getting stuck in the middle between two sides, and I don't blame them. Which is why like I said previously, the input meeting is so important because you're setting that expectation, making it that much easier on the maintenance facility, and leaving it up to the two brokers to hash out obviously what is and is not considered airworthy, and obviously if it's going to get rectified and on whose dime. So it's not fun that some of these maintenance facilities are just not giving you a definition. They're saying, hey, you guys figure it out. This is your deal, and let us know what we need to rectify. But a lot of them are trending towards that, I've seen.
I'll jump on that one. Why you're referring to the AP as dictating airworthiness, the AP doesn't dictate airworthiness, it dictates a standard for delivery. Chapter 5 and the maintenance manual dictates the airworthiness limits. At least I'd be happy for any opposing opinion.
Yeah, no, you're correct.
But kind of going back to what Vinny was saying, though, when they throw it all in there and you haven't stated your expectations, I don't even want to say ask, but I'm stating my expectations as your customer. I want you to give me I want them to be identified as I'm going through them. I want those to be identified, not just everything listed. And and like we said, once again, it's all about communication, it's about transparency, it's going forward, setting those expectations, but it's also like the progressive communication. I think that's something that's key in a lot of different areas. Some people have portals, some people have, maybe it's an email communication, but I need the confidence as it's going through that, the work is being done. I need a trust but verify system, and I want to be able to see it. I want pictures, I want whatever it is, because I may just be in the office upstairs, but if I see something, I'm coming down to find my project manager on what's going on.
I've often said there's things you can control and things you can't control. You cannot control 100% supply chain. You can't control how you communicate. And I've seen too many situations where bad news was exacerbated by delivering it late. Because we have a lot of new people in industry, maybe the guy on point for the pre-buy at the MRNO is maybe he's been on the job 3 years. Maybe he's never learned how to deliver bad news. And in all the training I've had in 30 years, I can't ever count one time where somebody trained me how to deliver bad news. So the human reaction is you just procrastinate and it gets worse. And so controlling the communication factor, if the customer has confidence he's being delivered to in real time, he's going to take the bad news a lot better than if he gets the bad news 3 weeks late.
Well, that's the confidence, but you go back to like your confidence of the team you're building around you and the responsibilities we have to build a quality team, through our providers, through our brokers, through the lawyers, it is a team effort. There is nothing that works in a silo in this industry. And so this team effort that we're going and building about, because, at the end of the day, we want to sell the airplane, we want to buy the airplane, we want to deliver a quality, technically sound, safe aircraft that is good to go, as close to purchase as possible. And, and we also want to make sure we are preserving and retaining the value of this asset for our client. And so, it all kind of goes back to that, and it takes that communication. So I see a lot of these PPI and corrosion questions. Borescope questions, I'm not ignoring them. However, my little timer here is starting to wind down, and this was also another suggestion for Al for a session or something soon, because it is a very in-depth, and there's a lot of different things going on with the manufacturers that, well, it opens up a can of worms. It's a Pandora's box once you start getting in there.
On your blue sheet, tell Al to have a session at CGI London on pre-buys.
That's right, on your blue sheet, CJI London. But I think, though, that it also is, I think that there's very interesting, like for this specific topic, you revised your work scope on what that means on your different levels of inspections.
Yeah, no, we had to go through that. So our pre-buys, every year we go through them all and look at them just to make sure we're hitting all the hot spots. We use our methods group. We use our own internal pre-owned group, and we use several brokers. We'll just talk to them about once a year. A lot of times they don't change, but the engine thing was one that came up this year that we had to make sure we adjust. So, one question really quick, though, that came up on mechanics, maintenance mechanics that provide for the actual, I know that's a bigger topic than what we have here. If you go back 2 years ago, we were hiring about 200 to 250 mechanics a year. We were bringing them on. We were probably losing 275 to 300. So as fast as we could bring them in, we were losing them. We did all the lifestyle things with vacation and insurance and all that, but it really became a money issue. We had to go through last year and across the board give everybody several dollars an hour raise, and that really held up our attrition. But then what we did end up with is several mechanics that don't quite have the experience level that you would want. So we brought back a bunch of our retired guys, and we just let them wander the floor. Like Sean Miller in Tucson, we got guys in Hartford, and all they do is walk the floor and look for guys that they're questioning, they look lost, and they'll walk up, hey, how can I help you? And so we are having to build our own talent, just like everybody else. We're working with the schools and those things, but retaining the talent is huge. So that's what we had to do to retain the talent. It was a money thing. So.
Yeah, we're seeing the same things. On some of our investments that are commercial OE focused, we spend all the time talking about, budgets, and it's really what's Boeing going to build to, what are those production rates? On the BizAv side with Yingling, it's really, we have a revenue target, which is implied labor hours, which means we have to add so many people. It's can we get those people? So that's been a real focus for us and for everyone. It's, obviously there's parts shortages, there's supply chain constraints, but it's really coming down to labor, good talent, and being able to retain that talent.
I think as you follow the migration of aircraft to independence over its lifespan and the migration of talent, I think there are spaces, especially in the out-of-production aircraft. The best textbook case I can think of is probably Mid-Continent up in Wichita. They specialize in Hawker 4000s. I mean, most of their business model is focused on that one out-of-production aircraft. And when you get that much tribal talent, most of which came from the OEM, there are spaces where you have a niche business that I think they can actually do it better than the OEM and faster.
I think, part of this question is also about cost. And for years, the cost of technicians was it wasn't even classified as a profession really by the, okay, now I'm like going back into the way back bus, but it wasn't classified as a profession in the government something or other. But so it's had a very big change, and the cost, the beauty of an A&P, to me, the beauty of an A&P, an airframe and power plant license, is all of the different things you can do with that A&P. Yep. However, because of that, it is a very valuable tool that goes across multiple industries. And when you look at the responsibilities of an A&P, when you're signing something on there, and that's what they're doing, but they're only making X number of dollars where they can go and work in another industry and make Y number of dollars without the personal liability and responsibility, those are things to consider. I will say the industry is doing better about raising the pay for the A&Ps. I think it's doing great. However, I don't know if we always do a really good job of articulating that value to, once again, the people with the power who are writing the checks. And they have kind of a misconception. It's like, they'll pay the labor for their car, their yacht, but they cringe at a lower labor rate for their airplane. It's a very interesting dynamic.
Just jumping on a question here, it's a good one. How often do you see aircraft buyers taking a hands-on approach to aircraft inspections? Generally, not often. It's my job as a broker to educate them. A lot of times we work with new to ownership clients, and we educate them on what needs to be done, what is going to ensure that you have a safe aircraft. You're flying with your family, your colleagues, and obviously that's number one. But when it comes to sellers, they definitely get a little bit more hands-on because they know that they're generally on the hook for anything that's found. Any discrepancies that are brought up. So they generally like to have their hands more so in that inspection process, specifically going over what the final work scope looks like.
And so, like in my little world, if I have an operator that already has an established maintenance team, they will probably be much more involved in if they're either buying or selling. And now, however, we also say, that they may have only gone to 2 transactions in their entire career. So that's, once again, that's why it's our job to make sure to educate them and bring them along, because it is a perfect opportunity to educate them and said, what are you getting, or what are you, I need this information, where are the burn certs, those simple questions. So depending on what the level is, some of my pilot managed aircraft, I think it's always interesting how involved the pilots want to be in this process, and managing the pilots during the inspections is sometimes fun. They're great, but it's like, okay, let's have that discussion over here. To wrap up real quick, because I do have the zeros and everything like that. They don't give me walk off music, but I did get walk on. But just to wrap up, quick little tidbit: when you're thinking about when you're talking about your pre-purchase inspections and you're wanting to give just a piece of advice to the audience today, whatever advice you want to give, what would you give?
Mine is show up for the incoming debrief. I mean, it's huge. Both parties need to be there. And if you're hiring a consultant to go there and represent you, it really helps if he knows the airplane. I mean, just because somebody's a consultant and worked on Gulfstreams forever, they probably don't know Bombardier as much. So make sure you get somebody that's specific to that. I think that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I'd say do your homework, know who to go to, reputation of each players, and then just set expectations, which I think will be a common theme of what everyone's going to say.
I definitely agree with Aaron. Definitely, there's so many variables, obviously, when it comes to where you're going to end up going, OEM versus third party. But when you show up, make sure you have, all of your program numbers ready for the maintenance facility. Make sure, you know that they have labor available in the back shops in case discrepancies come up. It's the details that really matter, and that's what myself as a broker gets paid for, knowing this and making sure that this is all taken care of, and gonna obviously make your transaction that much smoother and cleaner.
Sellers should understand the risks of letting the buyers have unrestricted access to the engine. Program or not. I mean, if you're on program, look for the exclusions. Look for the FOD. If the program doesn't have corrosion, maybe I'm going to look for corrosion, which is mostly a cold section issue. But just focus on the exclusions of the program. That's where the buyer should keep his focus. Sellers should understand what their exposure is before they sign the APA.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Like we said, this is a topic that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and we could talk for a very long time. But I think everybody here is still here for the rest of the day if you have any questions. But thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for having a conversation with us.
Thank you, Al.